The fragile peace in Gaza has been shattered once again, as the city finds itself under a relentless barrage of violence. The skyline, once bustling with life, is now dominated by plumes of smoke and the haunting silence that follows each explosion. Israeli airstrikes rain down across the territory, lighting up the night sky and sending shockwaves through densely populated neighborhoods. The roar of jets overhead has become a grim soundtrack to daily life for Gaza's residents. On October 29, 2025, a US-brokered ceasefire collapsed, plunging Gaza back into chaos and despair. Hopes for a lasting peace were dashed in an instant, replaced by fear and uncertainty as violence erupted once more. Over 100 Palestinians have been killed in the latest bombardments, with strikes hitting residential buildings and turning entire city blocks into rubble. Families are left to mourn loved ones lost in the blink of an eye. Even tent camps, where displaced families sought refuge from previous attacks, have not been spared. Makeshift shelters now lie in ruins, leaving thousands with nowhere safe to turn. Rescue workers scramble through the debris, risking their lives to search for survivors amid scenes of devastation. Every hour brings new stories of heartbreak and resilience as communities band together to help those in need. Many of the dead are women and children, intensifying global concern over civilian safety and the conduct of war. Hospitals are overwhelmed, struggling to treat the wounded as families gather to mourn at hastily arranged funerals. For Gaza's people, the return of violence is a terrifying continuation of months of trauma and loss. Children, in particular, bear the scars of conflict, their lives upended by fear and uncertainty. Israel claims the offensive is necessary for security, citing ongoing threats. However, the timing of these attacks has destroyed recent diplomatic progress, undermining fragile trust between both sides. The renewed fighting has interrupted peace talks and dashed hopes for lasting calm, leaving diplomats scrambling to respond to the rapidly deteriorating situation. The renewed conflict raises urgent questions about the future of peace efforts. International leaders and peace activists alike are calling for restraint, but the path forward remains uncertain. As the sun sets over a devastated Gaza skyline, humanitarian aid waits at the border, and the world watches anxiously, hoping for a breakthrough that could finally bring an end to the cycle of violence and suffering. In the US, Gaza's renewed violence has reignited a fierce political debate. Figures like Senator J.D. Vance argued that a ceasefire could let Hamas regroup, echoing Israeli concerns and calling for a cautious U.S. approach. Meanwhile, progressive Democrats demand an immediate, permanent ceasefire to protect civilians and end the humanitarian crisis. Protests and demonstrations erupt nationwide, reflecting deep divisions over U.S. policy and the country's role as mediator. The Biden administration faces criticism from all sides, accused of both failing to pressure Israel and not doing enough to support its ally. This internal struggle in Washington has real consequences for Gaza, as America's response shapes the conflict's trajectory. At the heart of the conflict is Hamas, the Islamist group that has ruled the Gaza Strip since 2007. Over the years, Hamas has become deeply entrenched in Gaza's political, social, and military landscape, shaping daily life for its 2 million residents. Its rise to power followed years of tension and violence, and its leadership continues to exert significant influence over the territory. The United States and the European Union have officially designated Hamas as a terrorist organization, citing its use of violence and attacks against civilians. This designation has led to international sanctions and efforts to isolate Hamas diplomatically and financially, further complicating the situation in Gaza. Central to Hamas's ideology is its charter, which calls for the establishment of an Islamic state in all of historic Palestine. This uncompromising stance has fueled its long-standing and often violent struggle against Israel, shaping its policies and actions for decades. On the other side, Israel's stated objective is the complete dismantlement of Hamas's military and governing capabilities. This mission became even more urgent and forceful after the deadly Hamas attack on Israel in October 2023, which shocked the nation and the world. In pursuit of this goal, Israeli airstrikes and ground operations focus on targeting Hamas infrastructure, weapons caches, and leadership. However, the reality of urban warfare in Gaza, a densely populated area, means that distinguishing between militants and civilians is extremely difficult, leading to devastating consequences. Hamas often embeds its fighters, weapons and command centers within civilian neighborhoods, schools, and hospitals. This tactic makes tragic civilian casualties almost inevitable, raising the human cost of every military strike and drawing international concern and condemnation. Both sides remain deeply entrenched in their positions. Hamas views itself as a resistance movement fighting occupation, while Israel sees its actions as necessary for national survival and the protection of its citizens. With no compromise or diplomatic breakthrough in sight, it is the ordinary Palestinian families, living amid the rubble, displacement, and fear, who continue to bear the heaviest burden, paying the highest price for a conflict with no clear end. The real story of this conflict is lived by Gaza's civilians, trapped in a relentless struggle for survival. Every day, ordinary people wake up to uncertainty, not knowing if they or their loved ones will make it through the night. The sounds of explosions and sirens have become a grim backdrop to daily life, and the sense of fear is ever present. Renewed airstrikes have brought death and destruction to families already battered by months of war. Homes that once echoed with laughter now stand in ruins. And the loss is not just of property, but of memories and dreams for the future. Each attack leaves behind a trail of devastation that is impossible to fully comprehend. Safe zones are a myth. Displaced people flee from one shattered refuge to another, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs. For many, the journey is perilous, and the hope of finding safety fades with each passing day. Families are forced to make impossible choices, leaving behind everything they know in search of shelter. Overcrowded shelters and makeshift camps offer little protection from violence or the elements. With limited access to clean water, food, and medical care, daily life becomes a struggle for basic survival. Privacy is non-existent, and the constant noise and chaos make rest nearly impossible. Personal tragedies multiply. Parents lose children, children become orphans, and entire neighborhoods vanish in moments. The pain of loss is etched on every face, and the sense of helplessness is overwhelming. Communities that once stood together are now scattered and broken. Hospitals are overwhelmed, running out of supplies as wounded civilians pour in. Medical staff work around the clock, often risking their own lives, but the sheer number of casualties makes it impossible to provide adequate care. Many are forced to treat the injured in hallways, or even outside, as resources dwindle. The trauma is deep and lasting, especially for children who will carry these scars for life. Nightmares, anxiety, and fear become part of their daily existence, shaping a generation that has known nothing but conflict and loss. Even if the fighting stopped today, rebuilding homes, schools, and hope would take generations. The destruction is so widespread that recovery seems almost impossible, and the psychological wounds will take even longer to heal. The social fabric of Gaza is unraveling, and the cycle of grief and anger threatens any hope for peace. Families and communities try to support one another, but the weight of collective trauma is immense, making reconciliation and healing a distant dream. Each casualty is a stolen future, a reminder of the devastating human cost of war. Behind every number is a name, a story, and a family left to mourn. The world must not forget the price paid by Gaza's civilians, whose resilience is tested every single day. The world watches in alarm as Israeli strikes escalate, prompting condemnation from the United Nations and many world leaders. The UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights calls the civilian deaths appalling, urging all parties to respect international law. While the US and other allies defend Israel's right to self-defense, they express growing unease over the mounting civilian toll. Arab and global South nations issue stronger condemnations, demanding intervention and accusing Israel of war crimes. Press freedom is under threat, with journalists facing detention and restricted access, limiting independent reporting from Gaza. Deep international divisions paralyze efforts for a unified response, prolonging the suffering and pushing peace further out of reach. Alongside the violence, Gaza faces a humanitarian disaster of staggering scale. The blockade and relentless fighting have displaced most of Gaza's 2.3 million residents, leaving them in poverty and peril. Hospitals are overwhelmed or destroyed, with dwindling supplies, and no way to treat the wounded or sick. Makeshift camps and overcrowded shelters lack clean water and sanitation, fueling fears of disease outbreaks. Food is scarce, and malnutrition is rising, especially among children. Aid organizations struggle to deliver relief amid active fighting and blocked supply routes. The humanitarian response is stretched to the limit, unable to meet the overwhelming need. In Gaza, people are dying not just from bombs, but from hunger, disease, and neglect. As the dust settles, Gaza's future remains uncertain, with immense challenges and only faint hopes for peace. The immediate goal is a durable ceasefire to halt the bloodshed and allow humanitarian aid, but deep mistrust and opposing objectives make any truce fragile. A lasting solution requires addressing the root causes: decades of conflict, failed peace plans, and shattered trust. The two-state solution, once the dominant vision, now seems more distant than ever. Regional and international mediators must push for dialogue, reconstruction, and justice for victims. Amid the devastation, some voices still call for reconciliation and shared humanity. The challenges are monumental, but for Gaza's people, hope is a necessity, not a luxury.